You all have had a lot of questions that are really important questions, and some of them are very cultural and context-specific questions about who you are, what you're learning, what you're teaching, those kinds of things. So I want to make sure we have time for that. We also will have an assessment in our next session. I mean, this afternoon, like next, okay, after our break, after our next break. Which means that you all also may have questions about the materials that we've covered and how that is going to go for you. So we also want to make sure you have time for that, all right? I have a couple of small things that I want to continue to finish up with you all, or maybe not so small, but some things that are kind of more around differentiation, and I have one cartoon activity that I want you to do. So I'm going to back up. You can't read these, and I knew when I put this slide in that it was going to be not very readable, but it's multilingual learners. And again, I was very struck by the question about the fact that you all might not necessarily think of language as a minority in and of itself in a classroom, whereas back home we really do, and we have to work very hard to make sure that our language learners are accommodated. Having said that, you all are very multilingual, and you have people from all over that may or may not have different levels of skills around language. And so I can't read all of these, but the point is that, oh, this is so blurry, I'm having trouble. Wait a minute, hold on, I can do it from here. So pronounce names, know how to pronounce names is one of them, right? Engaging students in structured conversation or talk is the next one, where they're talking together. Then provide access to grade level curriculum. That's just curriculum kinds of things. Embrace and love them. So there's a whole actual, believe it or not, there's an entire literature around love in the classroom. And it's a kind of love and care that is built on educational philosophy. It's not just like this loosey-goosey kind of feel to it. If you want to know more, the work of Nell Noddings is around care in the classroom. And there are people who promote a philosophy of saying that we fundamentally start at care. And so there's just a variety of different things on here that I know you can't see, but I wanted to include the slide because it talks a lot about what we already are doing. Encouraging drawing, providing small group instruction, which we've done. So remember that if you had language challenges or even learning differences, to be within those groups is a safer way, and it also ensures that you are actively engaged, right? Collaborate with colleagues, set high expectations, so there's a variety. The point of including this was not that we were going to read every single thing, but it was more to help you understand that there is an entire movement, again, on how do we address multilingual learners. And we, again, have sometimes heard them as ELL, which are English language learners back home, or ML, which is multilingual, or those kinds of things. So there's varying ways to refer to that category, but it's one that we do consider to be part of culturally responsive teaching. By the way, did you all do your rivers? Did some of you, we have to remember to collect their rivers. Yeah, why don't you, can we collect, yeah, if you did your rivers, make sure your name is on them. We'll collect those. So the last piece, remember we did the chart for Tomlinson, which was differentiated instruction. We did universal design. We did culturally responsive. And the last model that I wanted to share with you today, and there are many, but the last one that I think is very common is social emotional learning, which is SEL. So again, you may have heard of this. It may be something that you have heard of within the field of either psychology or education. Social emotional learning is what we now understand is, again, it's going to sound a lot the same. These are different frameworks that are established. The best source for social emotional learning is this source, casel.org. which is where this chart comes from. But on this website, this chart is interactive. You can click on any one of these things and pop up more information. It's highly interactive on this website. And I cannot stress enough, this is the site I go to whenever I'm teaching about SEL or wanting to learn more about SEL. And the interactive wheel is quite useful. It gives definitions, it gives reflection, all sorts of things you can do. But in short, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to really just kind of encapsulate social emotional learning. We believe that we want to develop healthy identities and we want people to be able to manage their emotions. Okay, just looking at those first couple of spots. But we also tend to assume that students are coming in already able to do that. And that's not always true. In fact, we are all always working on what I call building our toolkit. We have our strategies in our toolkit, but we have to build the toolkit. So if I have a student who is not managing their emotions at any age or stage of the game, I can't simply say to that student, manage your emotions, please. I see you're not managing your emotions. Could you do that now? Right? It's like asking, what is it? It's like doing it without a coat hook. Manage your emotions. Oh, it fell down again. Manage it again. It fell down again. Right? We were talking before at the break about attendance concerns, right? And that's a whole other ball of wax in many systems. But if I just say get to class and it falls down, get to class and it falls down, get to class and it falls down, then we need to build some coat hooks. So we have talked about academic coat hooks. We have talked about subject matter coat hooks. But we're going to change the focus to talk about social emotional coat hooks, okay? Because that zone of proximal development also exists for our emotions. We can feel safe and comfortable. We can feel thrown off the top of the cliff. And it may have nothing to do with the subject matter. It may have to do with our lives, okay? So it's not enough to simply say, manage that emotion. The one thing you probably shouldn't do to somebody who's in crisis or in meltdown is to say, pull it together, right? Stop that. I don't know, in the history of the world, I doubt that stop that has ever actually done much to stop whatever that behavior is. When we are in fight or flight emotionally, our amygdala goes off. And I'm not a psychology person. Some of you may have studied the brain more than I have, but this much I know. And I know this in part from having a child on the autism spectrum, because autism mirrors trauma, even though there has not been trauma, because what happens is it sets the amygdala off too quickly. Okay, so it might be that you didn't get the cereal you thought you were going to get, or somebody asked you to find your lab partner names, and all of a sudden your alarm has gone off that you're in great danger. When your amygdala goes off, that is a protective element in the human brain. It's important. If right now a fire broke out, we would not be sitting here analyzing and thinking. We would be getting out. So that fight or flight response is important to human survival. But it backfires when we are expected to not have it go off and to be part of this other zone of learning, whether that's emotional, whether it's academic. When the amygdala goes off, it sends out that alarm, whoop, 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 whoop. When that alarm goes, the frontal lobe of learning shuts down. It will not happen at the same time, which means that if there's a fire that suddenly starts and I tell you to start reciting your times tables, you may know your times tables, but you will not be able to do it while you're trying to get out of a burning room. You will not. Your learning shuts down because this has sabotaged all of the systems. It has commandeered it. I shouldn't say sabotage, because it actually is a useful thing for us a lot of the time. There are times we need that to go off. It keeps us safe. The problem is when it goes off, when it either doesn't need to, or when we don't know how to manage it, okay? When that happens and this shuts down, that's why saying to somebody, can you stop that now, really doesn't, you can't, you're not talking reason. Your reason has shut down. And I use the example of autism only because I've watched how that happens when somebody goes into that mode very quickly, but it can be anything. We have a great number. We've been doing one of the things I don't have up here but fits into social emotional is trauma-informed practices, trauma-informed teaching. We have a great number of kids coming from trauma situations. Any child, adult, teenager who is in a refugee environment has as its base trauma. You are not a refugee unless you have faced trauma. Okay, fundamentally the definition of refugee. So when I talk about 30% of our population locally being in schools, being English language learners, they are also almost exclusively from trauma circumstances. That's not the fault of their parents, that's sometimes because their parents were trying to keep them safe. Okay? So trauma is not necessarily they have a bad home life. It might be that they have a very good home life that got them to safety. But what it does mean is that the amygdala is going off a lot more quickly and a lot more inconsistently than maybe we think is healthy. Okay? We have all, probably through our lives, had times that we have felt that alarm go off in our brains. Okay? The minute it does, the learning shuts down. So if I'm just yelling at somebody to pull it together, or even if I'm not yelling and saying, get this math done, and then you're free to go, I am working against the odds. There will never be a solution to that. What I need to do first is get this to calm down. That's where we start to build skill sets for students. To simply say, calm it down, it's like me saying, can you start speaking Russian now? Come on, let's go. You will say, no matter how many times, the coat just keeps dropping. So we can build coat hooks that are social emotional coat hooks as well. I will give you some examples. I will give you some examples in the case of my son with autism, first of all, because these have worked so extraordinarily well that he now has better coping skills than most of the human beings I know on this planet, okay? Strategy number 1, breathe. And we've all been told that, right? Just breathe. But actually taking some breaths can help to settle that a little bit. Okay, so just start by some breathing. Another thing I often tell people, or students, or whoever, is to say, take a walk around and come back. So actually leave the space, because it feels unsettling, leave the space and come back. What I've said in classrooms before is, go on down to the washroom, splash some water on your face, whatever you need to do, and come back. Okay, just get out for a second. Not forever, come back. Just go down to the washroom and come back. Another thing is a buddy system. I've often said to people, would you like a friend to go with you? Okay, because sometimes we get very worried about being alone in those situations. Again, I'm not trying to reason anything. I'm not trying to say you don't need to go to the washroom right now, or you don't need a friend with you right now. What I'm saying is we've got to get this calmed down before we're going to have a conversation. So I often will say, would you like a buddy or a partner to go with you? Or would you like to just sit quietly with a partner somewhere? Okay. Another thing my son does is he knows he has, well, and this was something we can do in schools, is there were safe spaces in the school. My son loves music, so the music room was a safe space for him. So if he was anywhere close to the music room, he could say, I need to go to the music room, and he could just go, and it was a place to be and breathe for a minute, and he could come back. Okay, so the music room was a safe spot. So there were a few safe spots around that people could kind of go to. You could set up a safe spot in your classroom. I mean, you don't have to, you could say, well, we don't have anything like that. Well, sure, you can set up a little corner with a beanbag chair or something. I don't know what you could do, but you could probably figure out some way to say, there's the safe spot. You can go use the safe spot if you need to, right? There are many, many things we can do to build a coat hook to say, okay, now, and we also, there's something I've done with little kids before where you do a light system. So you have a red light, a yellow light, and a green light. And you can actually even have one up. You can have one at the front of the room. You can have one at people's desks. You can have them inside notebooks. And you just have a red, a yellow, and a green. And you can say to somebody, where are you right now? I'm in green, I'm good, I'm fine. You could say, I'm in yellow, I'm in yellow. It's going to start to be a thing. Okay, I'm in red, I've shut down. Okay, and so you can actually have students start to self-assess where they are on their stoplight. So this is not an uncommon tool to use when you're trying to help with regulation. You're helping with that regulation. Now, it might feel silly for me to say to you all as college students or as adults who are teaching to say, where are you right now? But you can do the same on a 1 through 5 scale. I can say on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling right now, okay? Or you can do it with a hand up, okay? This means I'm fine, everything's going well. You can set up your own system, I mean, you know, whatever. This means I'm starting to stress, uh-oh, I'm done. So I could say, everybody hold your hand up about how you're feeling right now, and everybody's gonna show me, and I can glance around the room, and if somebody's somewhere above a 3, I'm gonna start to say, do I need to check in with that student? Universal design says I can ask everybody that. I know for sure, let's just say, again, I'm just using this as an example, I know for sure that you're more likely to be at a 5, and you're more likely to be at a 5, but I can do it for everybody, and I can keep my eyes particularly on the ones that I'm worried about. Now, eventually, students start to do that for themselves, even to the point, remember I told you I went in to buy a sari and I said, I'm above my ZPD. There's a point where students can go, I'm at a 3, okay? I'm okay right now, but I'm heading towards a 4, right? Students can start to say it. The more we do that, the more we're building the code hook so they can start to build their own code hook, okay? You might have a safe person that you know is there for you in some way, shape, or form, and that's also a fair thing to do. To this day, my son on the autism spectrum is 29 years old. To this day, if he's having a very hard moment and he's feeling like he's creeping towards a 4, he will call me or he'll text me. And all he needs to do is say, I'm having a tough time right now. I'll figure this out and talk with you later. He just knows that there's, so when I'm in India, I tell him, you can always text me that. It's one of his safety zones. He's building a toolkit for himself so that he can be successful. Again, he's one of the most successful people in terms of toolkit building because we worked on it with him since he was 5 years old or before, right? We started with a stoplight, then we moved on to a 5-point system, then we moved on to, you know. So you can do that kind of thing with a whole class. So we need to build. We do not want to assume that students are coming in already knowing all of this, right? So if somebody's rude to another person, let's say, we don't just say, you know better. We say, what did you just do there and why did you think that was your best answer, right? Or what do we need to do next time? Or what does that mean? So sometimes people simply do not know, or sometimes they do know and they're reacting, right? So building that toolkit means that the next time around to say, remember what we talked about? What do we need to do, okay? So we can help to build this in our classrooms as part of, now a lot of people are gonna say, I don't have time for that, it's one more thing to think about. What I'm trying to say is, doing any of these things that I just did actually makes my life a lot easier in a classroom and doesn't take, to have you do a hand signal, everybody do that right now, how are you feeling right now on a scale of this to this? Just honestly, and so, okay, how about this? How about if students are embarrassed to put up a hand? Everybody put your heads down on your desks, go ahead, put your heads down. Put your heads down. Put your hands up with a 0 through 5 on how you're feeling right now. Everybody, how you're feeling for your stress levels, how you're feeling for things. All right, put your heads back up again. Now, to put your head down means nobody has to ever be embarrassed. Nobody ever has to say, oh, I can't put my hand up at a 3 because everybody else around me is 0, right? So I actually do that a lot with students. We'll say, put your heads down. Pre-COVID, when COVID was just coming into being out of class, it was extremely anxious. It was pretty clear that, I always said it was the zombie apocalypse, right? I kept saying, no, it's not the zombie apocalypse, and then it kind of was. And then I said to them, okay, put your heads down. How many of you are worried about a family member? And they put their hands up. How many of you are scared for your own health? Put your hands up. How many of you are worried about your academic progress right now? Put your hands up. With the heads down, they were a lot more able to be honest about what was really happening. And it was, I don't have a solution to all of that. What I'm teaching is code hooks. I'm not going to take a stress away. Sorry, I can't solve COVID. What I can do is help you start to do a better assessment of where we build our toolkits. And then I say this, I don't leave it at that. I say, how many of you can think of one strategy to help you cope with that anxiety? Again, heads down. Raise your hand if you can think of a strategy. And then I can see who's got strategies and who doesn't. How many of you think you're getting enough sleep at night? Raise your hand. Again, all of this with your head down so nobody's embarrassed, nobody's feeling on the outs, nobody's going to get picked on, okay? what I'm doing in those exercises, and I do them pretty regularly with my students as the term goes on, especially if I sense a lot of high stress, I say, can you all think of a thing to do to help your stress? And then if I see that somebody can't think of one, I'll touch base with them separately, or I'll send them a quick email. I noticed you didn't have your hand up. Do you have somebody who's a support, or do you need something to be triggered in the system? So social emotional learning involves all of these different kinds of things. Your own self-awareness, which is how am I feeling right now? What does it mean? What does send me into stress? How much sleep do I need? Did I eat breakfast this morning? Okay, that's self-awareness. Self-management, do I have tools in my toolkit? If not, how do I build them? Responsible decision-making, am I able to make decisions? By the way, decision-making is really about self-efficacy. I often use the example, I drive a lot, and Maine has a lot of very rural roads. And I used to worry a lot about like my car breaking down somewhere. Now with phones, it's a lot better because I have AAA, I have supports in place. But I used to ask myself, if I get a flat tire, actually I do know how to change a flat tire, but aside from that, the bigger question isn't whether I know how to do it, it's whether I know how to access somebody who does know how to do it. Do I know how to problem solve so that I'm not in despair if something were to happen? Do I have somebody I can call? Do I know that I know where to get that information? So decision making is really not necessarily about having to solve everything. It's just about knowing how to be have self-efficacy, which means kind of being able to, you don't have to be independent. You don't have to know how to do everything. You just need to know how to contact somebody who does, okay? Relationship skills, again, kind of like, do you know when you're being mean? Do you know that what you said was inappropriate? Or do you know when, you're hurting somebody's feelings? Do you know how to build those relationship skills? Social awareness, this is the one that autism spectrum. By the way, I just saw we have a rate of 1 in 31 now in the US for autism spectrum. Now we're better at diagnosing, and you can have high and low spectrum and all of that, but social awareness is a big one. Not knowing, how do you say hi to somebody? How do you pick a seat coming into the classroom? These are the kinds of things that undo some people. They come into the classroom on the first day and they're like, oh my gosh, panic. How do I pick a seat? Okay, I'll sit here. No, wait a minute. I can't sit there. Somebody must be there. There's a plate there. I'll sit over here. No, that person might not like me. I better not sit there. Well, if I go over there and I have to use the bathroom and washroom, now I've got to get across the room. I better not sit there. Just sitting down can be anxiety producing, right? So what is our social awareness around kind of interacting with the social world? We are social beings. So there are social deficits that a lot of people have that we have to kind of help build toolkit, okay? And then there's lots of things. We can build the climate in the classroom. We can actually teach some of this instruction. We have school-wide culture, which means our school as a whole, the building as a whole, the place as a whole, a department as a whole. How do we make that? We can do authentic partnerships, which means we have real connections to the world around us to practice this. And we align our learning opportunities. And all of these things through CASEL are actually linked for more ideas, okay? And again, just feeling and showing empathy, establishing and maintaining support, making responsible and caring decisions. At the end of the day, you can say, I don't know, I give up, I don't know what to do for any of this. But we don't really want to we don't want to victimize ourselves, right? And at the end of the day, that works for the short term, but it doesn't work in the long term. Long term says, I have to take ownership of my behaviors, but I might need help, okay? So this model is another one to think about. Okay, I'm gonna stop with that. Do you have questions about this idea? Do you understand what this is all about? Do you understand that some of it is just in the way we set things up and manage? Some of it's just in keeping your ears open. If somebody's picking on somebody, say, no, we don't do that, and you pull somebody aside. Or if somebody's saying, I'm in stress, then we work with that and manage it. What do you need to do right now to de-stress that? It's always better if the student themselves or the person can come up with the idea, right? What could you do right now? That could breathe. Yes, that's a great idea. Why don't you breathe? I could go to the washroom and come back. Yeah, that's a great idea. Now, I might have to set some of that up initially. Scaffolding, okay? All right. Any questions about any of this? Okay, the last thing I want to do is actually take you to, oh, this is not a break. Sorry. Joking. I am going to go down to this. Has anybody ever seen this cartoon before? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, some of you have. I'm going to do a small group activity, and then we're going to close this out so we have time for questions and for other things. In this cartoon, and again, notice I verbalize what's on the cartoons because some people visually may have more challenge, but to do that helps everybody. Universal design, hello, right? So we have a person sitting at a desk, and he's saying for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And we have a variety of animals, all the way from this little bird, all the way through to the dog, whose task it is, the exam, is to climb the tree. Now, there's a pretty traditional way of looking at this. First of all, just tell me what you think. What do you think this cartoon is trying to say? Anybody? What do you see here? There's bias in a way, because who's going to climb the tree best? Probably the monkey. Who else has an advantage? The bird can fly up there. Okay. What else do you see here? Is this, yeah?
Everybody has the same ability, so assessing on the same standard would be correct.
That's the way we normally think of this.
Continuing her point that we should have the different standards of assessment for this particular task.
Okay. All right, so here's where we get to the crux of the biscuit, which is this. We look at this and say exactly that, which is the standard is not fair to everyone. But I want to back ourselves out of that, and I want to rethink this. Remember what I said about trying to keep our standards the same? If my classroom, this is what people argue. Well, I mean, the fish is never going to get it. The fish doesn't belong in this classroom. This is not a good classroom. This classroom has to be all monkeys. The minute we do that, we've just shut that classroom out to everybody who isn't a monkey. All right, fine, we'll take the birds too. They can fly up. I don't care. Fine. The minute we do that, we've just gone against everything we've been working so hard to do, which is to say, I want all of these in my classroom. So now I have another issue. The dog, the seal, the penguin, the elephant, how in the world are we going to manage? The question isn't whether we need different standards. Flip it. Flip it. The question is not if we need other standards. Let's keep the standard the same. Let's say they need to get to the top of, let's rework this. You don't need to climb the tree. I'm going to change it to be, please get to the top of that tree. Now I want you turning and talking. You can do groups of 3 or 4. I'm fine with that. Groups of 3 or 4. And I want you to say, how will we help everybody get to the top of the tree? Are you answering that question? Okay, but get in your groups and talk about that. That's exactly right. We are not going to change the standard. We're going to keep the standard. I'm going to rephrase it slightly. The standard is everyone must reach the top of the tree. Top of that tree is your test. The top of that tree is whatever it is. Now turn and talk and figure out what are we going to do, because we've got a classroom full that have to get to the top of that tree. I'm not booting anybody out of my classroom. Be creative. Keep going. Be as creative as you can be. Anything goes. Be as creative as you want to be. Make sure you're including everybody, okay? Make sure everybody gets there. Your job is to make sure everybody gets there. All right? Okay, let's come back around. You are not allowed to have anybody leave the classroom. I'm sorry, but that's not allowed. We believe in differentiated instruction. We also are not going to just tell the goldfish that it just gets to splash around while everybody else climbs the tree. That's not what we're doing. We are getting everybody to the top of that tree, to the very best of our abilities. So let's start with what you were about to say before we broke into groups. Change the process. Aha! How might we do that?
We can put them in groups, so we can keep the monkey in one group and then the penguin in one group and the elephant and seal in one group.
Oh, we could group them in a way so they could work collaboratively. That's a great idea. How about from this side of the room? What's something somebody came up with over here?
We were thinking that they could help each other, all of them out. Like if the deer elephant uprooted the tree entirely.
Okay. All right. Now we've got somebody. We've got the elephant that's going to uproot the tree so that it can help some of the people, like the dog, might then be able to reach the top of it because we can put the tree in a different position. Exactly right. What else? Tell me anything else you all thought of. As crazy as you want to be.
I might be wrong completely.
No, you're never wrong.
But as a teacher, what would I do here as an inclusive education? That I will not change the standard. That
Right, you don't change the standard.
That cannot be changed, but I'll keep the standard same. What I'll see assessing is that I'll assess individually
Okay.
the students
Okay.
in their own parameters, like how much monkey can do that.
Okay, so we set within their ZPDs, I could actually set slightly different parameters. Let's keep going. What are some other ideas? What did you were going to say something.
It was similar to that.
Okay.
Like the elephant would bring the tree down. So that
The elephant can bring the tree down. What else?
like maybe like they help each other and maybe not the elephant may not just be up there, but its trunk may be big enough.
Okay, so maybe we're grading it on the team as a whole. So maybe the elephant is lifting something to the top, and we can still give the elephant some credit for getting that exactly. Yep.
Okay, that will sound funny,
Yeah.
but it's okay even if they reach the shadow of the tree top. Like
The shadow? Oh, I haven't heard it. I've done this exercise so many times. Nobody has ever suggested the shadow of the tree. No one has ever suggested that. Bravo. The shadow of the tree maybe could work, right? Maybe there's a way to think about what's the shadow of the tree metaphorically. What else?
We can also, like, we can use table or chairs for...
Could use table. There's tools around us we might use. What if we've got a table and a chair here? Yes. Why don't we use some supports in place that literally scaffold, right? We were actually building a scaffolded set of steps to help people get up there. All right? We still have a problem with this poor little fish unless the elephant lifts it up. Anybody think of, yeah.
Can the monkey just take the fish with him? Like,
Okay, maybe. Maybe the monkey just takes the fish on up. Anything else we could think of?
Our concern more is an elephant technique.
Okay, all right. Yeah, exactly. We just stack them all up. Think outside the box. Can we change the environment? Can we change the environment?
yeah, so if everyone goes up and now the elephant is down, what if the elephant takes the desk, stands on the desk, and then manages to reach the top of the tree
Yes.
with its trunk?
Yes.
Yeah, and it just holds on to it. You know, because it's
It holds on to it with its trunk.
because it technically it's
Right?
up.
Okay, so we get the steps up, we get to the top, we get the elephant with its trunk. Still something we can do to change this environment.
We can maybe say that go and gather food. So we can put the fish in the water and say, oh, gather food, and maybe that can be a goal.
Oh, maybe the fishes, although that does change the standard. However, leaning into that, we could say that the fish actually supports the others in other ways, such as getting food, let's say, for sustenance. If the fish needs water, could we build some systems of water so the fish can swim to the top of the tree? Could we maybe make sure that if the tree comes down, that some of it's in the water?
Maybe very funny, but then can we change the top with the bottom?
Can we change the top with the bottom? So that maybe we actually are starting with yeah, so everybody's kind of equal there. But then are we learning or are we in our comfort zones? That's the question there. Zero gravity environment? There you go. There you go. See, now that's thinking like a scientist. Can we maybe change the environment? So I've had people say things like we could rig up a water system, right? Or we could flood the whole area. Now, I don't know if all of these animals could survive a water environment, but most of them could. I think the bird could too. I think most of these animals could survive a water environment, right? So we're not just helping the fish, we might actually be helping a number, the seal and the penguin might also really thrive and flourish. So, and maybe what I do is I have more than one test for that top of the tree so that maybe if we do have some things that are still a little bit unfair or unequal, maybe the next test is actually swimming across or getting across a river. And then that represents maybe another standard or another thing we're trying to get to. And then we draw another, because is this fish without skills? No, it's not without skills. It's just without the skill to climb that tree, right? Is the dog without skills? No. We think the monkey's got it all, but wait till that monkey has to fit inside a little place, right? A little space. Maybe that's one of the tests or so on. The point is, the fish has needs and strengths, okay? This poor little seal has some needs here. Okay, right? So I want you to flip your thinking about something like this. Again, just kind of work symbolically. We don't always have every answer for every one of these, but think about this as a classroom. We do not, our first answer is not to say, monkey gets the A+, I just want the class of monkeys next term. That's not what we're talking about all week long. We've been talking about saying, this goldfish is very welcome in my class because guess what I don't know much about? I don't know much about surviving in water. But if I do know more about it, I might be able to create a system that allows that fish to succeed. So I want you, as we're working with people, to always imagine that you have some monkeys, some birds, some fish, and some elephants all in front of you or working with you. And we don't want to say, sorry, elephant, I don't have any room, I can't take you. We can change an environment, we can change a process, we can change the affect, we can change all sorts of different ways. We can change a product. Maybe we could have them draw the top of the tree. I don't know if the fish can draw. We could have them dance the top of the tree, right? Okay. All right, we're going to close out there with that section. Yes?
When we change the environment and we change the settings in favor of all, I'm sure the monkey is going to get mad.
Yeah.
And this generally happens in
Yes,
class.
yes it does. Yes, it does. Yeah, the monkey's going to be pretty bummed out. Wow, I had that A really wrapped up. The monkey, he is definitely the happiest. Look at the penguin's like, oh. The fish, I never thought about that. The fish is like, oh. The monkey's like, got it. All right, the point is a fair one. This monkey's going to be really bummed out. So I have to also take care of my monkey here, okay? And I need to take care of my monkey's social emotional well-being. Maybe this monkey needs to learn to share a little bit. Maybe this monkey needs to learn that they're in the world with a whole lot of other people. And maybe the monkey needs to learn that not every task is getting to the top of the tree. Monkey's going to have a harder time. Like I said, maybe there's a different task. So I might say to this monkey, you can be angry, you can be worried, you can be upset, but it doesn't diminish your capacity to allow the fish to also reach the top of the tree. Now, in a competitive market-based world, it does in some ways. The monkey says, now I don't have a chance at the job I want because all these people can do my job. So I would say to that, well, then maybe we need to rethink what you see as the value of your education, right? It might take a conversation. It might mean taking good care of the monkey as well, okay? We don't want to let the monkey feel that, oh, well, you know, we don't care about the monkey. We do, okay? But yeah, the monkey's going to be a little bummed out, right? And we do see that. That's a very fair point. Actually, that's another one that people haven't talked about really much.
You had talked about needs and strengths.
Yes.
So each one of them have their own strengths. So
Correct.
If they say that this is the first assignment, next assignment, someone
Right.
else's strength might not.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So I make sure when I build my curriculum, it's not always the tree that they're reaching the top of. It's not always going to be that process. That's what I mean about we can change things. So for some of these people that works, for some it doesn't. We'll just figure that out as we go. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, did you?
So, in the same context, in that case, the fish and the penguin, these are
Yep.
the children, they don't have the code books over there. And how to start with it because they don't
Right.
have the skills actually.
Right, so now what we have to do is back it way out. Maybe what we do initially is give them some kind of artificial something that builds that, right? Like, I mean, if we're really being crazy and we let anything go, right? What do they need? They might need to have, again, they may need a partner, right? Or they might need, if they're going to build a coat hook, maybe what they need to do is think about building a muscle in a certain way, right? So we might have to back it out, but yeah. And are there times that we may just simply say we just did everything we could and we're just not quite there? The point about this is, the way it's worded and the way we think about it is that it's, first of all, that exams are unfair, and they're not always unfair. They are a data point, okay? The second thing is that we could read this that not everybody, that everybody's static in what their gifts and strengths and needs are. And that's also not true. The third thing that we tend to assume is that some of these people just simply don't belong in these learning environments, and we just want to ask ourselves, we want to say that's not true. We want to think about ways we can make that not true. And so when we flip it around, it puts, oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. It also puts the full responsibility on these students to figure it out. And when we flip it, it puts some responsibility on us to manage that environment. It puts the responsibility on us to say, could I help this goldfish get to the top of the tree? This is where sometimes teachers say, it's not my responsibility, that's not my classroom. But what I'm saying is it's actually a much more joyful place. It's a much more greater place of joy and hope and care if we do say that and take that responsibility. Why are we teaching if it's not for the goldfish, right? And for the poor monkey who's going to feel really, really sad. Yeah.
Also suggests that this classroom is a place meant for only the monkeys.
Yes, exactly. And so I once heard a great quote from a principal, a school principal, who said, we believe, they were all about reaching the standards, and they really had this going on, and they were trying to figure out how to reach the standards for everybody. And what they said was, we often put students out on a limb. I mean, speak about a tree metaphor. We often put students out on a limb, and this principal said, I believe that we need to be on the limb with them, because we're not going to saw ourselves off, right? So that's always stuck with me. Are we out on the limb with that student? So if we're putting a student out on a limb, are we there with them? And that principal's comment really struck me, that we need to be on the limb with the student, okay? Otherwise, we're really inclined to just saw that limb off and not worry about it. But if we're on the limb with the student, we're not going to do that. That places some of the onus onto the teacher, right? Okay, I am going to wrap that up. I'd like to turn our attention to the fact that we have an assessment coming up. We have a lot that we've covered. We have a little bit more tomorrow around assessment, actually, so we can think about that in light of, we're going to look at how do we build assessments, how do we think about assessments, what are rubrics. So I have a little bit on that. Let's kind of turn our attention, to maybe, I think the best thing would be to question anything that's kind of, we haven't had a lot of time to process together on the larger questions that might be emerging for people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can end this session.
We can end this session with the taping and then, okay.